All right, welcome in. It's Bishop on Air on this Wednesday. We made it halfway through the week, and we've got tons to get to, including at the end of everything, we'll do a bonus review of the Springfield City Council. It's a program that I've done for terrestrial radio. Going to bring it here to the internet stream. As a bonus feature for those who really rely on a review of Springfield City Council meetings. So we'll do that. But also, we've got to tackle the gun registry rules that were discussed at JCAR yesterday. That's the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules. But that wasn't the only thing that JCAR discussed yesterday. They also had a lot of conversation about daycare rules. And I think this is important because you've got the issue of daycares and staffing and how they're able to possibly watch certain rooms of children with certain levels of education, and who can and cannot do that type of review, which really, if you think about it, it's a fundamental aspect of getting back to work is you need childcare. So we'll definitely review that. But also, again, as I said, we've got to talk about the gun registry rules. So that's something else that's coming up here. I'm Greg Bishop. It is Bishop on Air, live this Wednesday morning. Hopefully you click subscribe, like, and that notification bell, especially if you're on YouTube. That way you can be notified. Yesterday we went live at 8 o'clock. Today we're going live at 7:30. So I think, I'm learning how everybody watches and consumes things online. And sometimes it seems people, they take it in during their lunch break, or sometimes people take it in while they're making dinner after they get off work. Others are listening on their way in using a mobile app like YouTube, for instance. So either way you're getting it, greatly appreciate you being here. And stay tuned. We've got just moments from delving into what happened with JCAR yesterday, the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules. So that's next. Well, yesterday was the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules hearing where they had the Illinois State Police rules on the gun ban and registry. And that's where you've got to, of course, register your firearms within a certain amount of time, or you could face criminal penalties, either Class A misdemeanor up front, or the second and subsequent offenses could be a Class 3 felony. So yesterday, the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules, we're going to delve into some of the weeds here, but I think it's important people understand where we're at in this process because as we've talked about, you've got the 7th Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals that are still sitting on a potential ruling for the challenge against the state's gun and magazine ban based on Second Amendment grounds. So that's still pending in the 7th Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals about Illinois' gun and magazine ban. But you also have the measure being challenged back in the Southern District of Illinois. And that federal court heard last week arguments that the law was too vague. And when you get to the vagueness questions, it becomes evident for the Second Amendment supporters out there, the gun rights supporters, that the rules are too vague. And they want more clarity if this thing is going to be upheld. But it's still uncertain if the law is actually going to be upheld, as it faces challenges again in the 7th Circuit, still pending, and in the Southern District with a potential ruling out of that district. Possibly in the weeks ahead, who knows? Courts move at their own pace, so we'll definitely be watching that. But JCAR, the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules, is a legislative body. It's equal parts Democrat, equal parts Republican. Despite there being a Democrat supermajority at the Illinois State House, the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules is truly bipartisan. There's 5 members of Democrats, there's 5 members of Republicans, and split among the members of the House and the Senate, and so on. So you can see that it's bipartisan, and how many members there actually are, where I think there's 6 and 6, but only 10 were at attendance yesterday, but they were equal Democrat and Republican. Either way, you've got the issue of these rules that were put into place by Illinois State Police. These rules were emergency basis, filed last month. The registry opened October 1st. Illinois State Police show that only about 1,000 people have actually registered things. About 3,000 items. Most are, of course, firearms that meet the definition the Illinois legislature banned. Semi-automatic rifles, shotguns, handguns. They also banned magazines, but you don't have to register your magazines over a certain capacity. But you do have to register attachments and accessories. What exactly are those? This is where you get into the vagueness issues. There's a lot of questions about the firearms, of course, that you have to register, but there's questions about the attachments, and I think that's evident in the numbers that Illinois State Police has published, showing that it's only 17 accessories have been disclosed to Illinois State Police. So that's where we're at now. A little over, almost 3 weeks here of the registry being open, and of 2.4 million firearm owner identification card holders, you've got this low turnout of actual compliance with that rule. So yesterday was the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules. They're reviewing the rules that Illinois State Police filed. There's 3 different tracks they could go. They could either file a motion to suspend the rules, which would suspend the rules and essentially say that, the registry is not operating right now because the rules are suspended. That didn't happen yesterday. There are 2 other option motions that they had. One is a recommendation, which just says, hey, we're recommending that you do this, that, and the other. It's not a requirement, but we're recommending you do that. We'll get to that motion here in a moment, but a second motion that was offered but failed was the motion objecting to the rules, which wouldn't have suspended the rules, but it would have just been a vocal objection from the legislature, and that possibly could be something to have added into the court cases on all of this. So let's go ahead and hear now from the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules how this played out yesterday up in Chicago.
JCAR object to the Illinois State Police emergency rulemaking titled Firearm Owner's Identification Card because the rulemaking does not meet the criteria under 1 Admin Code 230.400A3E and A1H, which require emergency rules to be simple and clear so that the rule can be understood by the persons and groups that the rule affects, and to comply with the statutory authority and legislative intent upon which the rule is based. The rule lacks detailed, defined terms, which makes compliance by the regulated public improbable. Further, the rule permits broad interpretation of the terms assault weapon and assault weapon attachment outside of rule, when the legislative intent clearly indicates the list of assault weapons is to be comprehensive, detailed, and updated by the Illinois State Police as needed.
So you've got State Representative Ryan Spain as the co-chair. He talks a bit about where we're at in the process, asks for a vote on this objection.
Note that a vote to object to an emergency rule requires a majority of members present and voting on the motion. Additionally, an objection does not stop an emergency rule, and if this motion passes, the emergency rule will remain in effect. Staff, please call the roll.
So they call the roll, and the roll call comes out to essentially be split along party lines, where you've got 5 for and 5 against an objection motion in front of JCAR yesterday.
The final vote being 5 votes in the affirmative and 5 votes in opposition. As a result, this objection motion fails.
But then you have State Representative Ryan Spain, a Republican co-chair, talk about the next step, and it's a motion for offering up some recommendations.
We've had a lot of discussion on this topic as a committee. We've received many, many questions on this topic as members of JCAR. And we could really literally be here all day and night going through each one of these questions, seeking answers from the Illinois State Police. And rather than doing that, we've had discussions with the State Police, representatives of whom are here today in the room with us. They understand the very lengthy, detailed questions, areas of ambiguity that we're looking for resolution, and the State Police have agreed to respond to questions that will be generated and facilitated to them through this committee, and have agreed to also hold additional public hearings for the permanent rulemaking associated with this topic. And so we have a lot of discussion that will continue to take place. JCAR will be meeting again in Springfield in November early November during the second week of veto session, and then again here in Chicago in December. So expect a lot of continued discussion on this topic and an ability to provide further clarification to questions, whether they're specific firearm attachment, magazine questions, issues about private security contractors, questions about transfers in the return of firearms.
So again,
will all be subject to additional conversation.
State Representative Ryan Spain talking about further meetings coming up, but what was the actual resolution that passed? It's a recommendation resolution.
Rulemaking titled Firearm Owners Identification Card Act, JCAR recommend that the Illinois State Police add clarifying detail to the rulemaking, including the definitions of assault weapon and assault weapon attachment, when an individual's weapons may be returned to them upon reinstatement of a FOID card, the duration and location of affidavit exempt activities, and addressing any other comment or concerns. Furthermore, the committee recommends that ISP holds 3 public hearings on this topic and answer questions of the committee and public commenters in writing within 60 days and update the committee on its progress at the committee's November meeting.
Thank you. Co-Chairman Cunningham moves, seconded by Representative Reich, that the motion just read be approved. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. And in the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the motion passes.
So that is essentially how JCAR played out with the rule about the gun registry for the state of Illinois, something obviously a lot of people are interested in, not just gun owners out there, but also people who operate firearms dealers. I talked with Dan Eldridge. He owns Maxson Shooter Supply and Indoor Range in Des Plaines about the outcome yesterday. Is it what they expected when it comes to whether or not they're going to have these rules suspended, because it didn't suspend the rule yesterday. The rule was just merely offered up recommendations from the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules. Here is my conversation with Dan from yesterday, where he talked about what they were looking for and how the federal firearms licensees of Illinois really provided a ton of comments to get what hopefully could be at least a better process if this whole thing is upheld by the courts, which that's still in question, whether or not this gun and magazine ban is going to be upheld in the courts, though a lot of people patiently awaiting the next steps in the federal court system. Here's Dan Eldridge.
They published the rules, the state police published their rules around, especially around the registry, on September the 18th. And so we had a very limited time to respond. The dealer organization, FFLIL, did file a response before the deadline with the state police requesting 3 hearings, one in northern Illinois outside of Chicago, one in central Illinois, and one in southern Illinois. Our thinking being that it's really quite burdensome for people throughout the state to have to travel to Chicago or travel to Springfield for a public hearing. What we got out of JCAR today was it is what it is. We're glad that the call for hearings was heard, and I think the public hearings should be very informative for the state police with respect to the rules that they published.
So again, that's Dan Eldridge, conversation I had with him yesterday, and I got him to respond to Illinois State Police, who sent me a message saying that we're happy to address all questions and comments submitted to ISP, and we'll be doing so in the weeks to come. You've got ISP also saying that they already have one public hearing scheduled regarding the Protect Illinois Communities Act and are working to schedule 2 additional hearings. Now, the next hearing is November 2nd, where you've got, well, quite frankly, a whole bunch of people that are, I'm imagining, wanting to attend this public hearing. And in particular, you've got questions about the room space, because the room that they have carved out here, state police say that November 2nd, they're going to be in Springfield, room D1 of the Stratton building. Room D1 of the Stratton building at the Capitol Complex, November 2nd. And I imagine it's going to be early in the day, where you've got a bunch of people expecting to come, I imagine. But the room is tiny. There's only about 100 people that can actually fit into this room, having been on the grounds in the Capitol in this particular room watching committee hearings. There's not a lot of space in the Stratton building D1. So that's going to be fascinating to see how that plays out. And if they're going to have to move it to another room, maybe there's another room at the Capitol, inside the Capitol proper, I think 118 it is, where you could fit several hundred people in there, and even standing room only, you could fit even more probably. I'm not a fire marshal. I don't know the capacities of all these rooms, but Stratton D1 is tiny, and I don't know if that's going to be able to fit all of those who may want to take part in a public meeting with Illinois State Police about these rules. I asked Dan Eldridge to respond to that and what his thoughts are on the possibility of such a small room being where Illinois State Police are going to hold this meeting. Here's Dan.
I expect that attendance at these hearings is going to be well in excess of what they could fit into that room. These rules are serious business. There's compliance risk for FFLs. There's compliance risk for manufacturers and customers, gun owners. We're talking about possible felony charges, and their rules that they published largely restated the act. They didn't educate anybody on all the ambiguity that's shot throughout this thing. Just one example: what's an instance of possession of a banned weapon? It's never really defined. Is it per firearm that's in your safe? Is it your safe? If it's examined at one time, nobody knows. And the difference between 1 and 2 offenses is significant. One's a misdemeanor, and the second one is a felony, where you're stripped of your gun rights, among other things. So it's a big deal. People are understandably quite worried about this implementation. We continue to press on multiple fronts within the courts to get the entire act struck down. But in the meantime, if we can get these rules clarified and implemented in a way that's at least less onerous, then that's a small win, but a win.
So again, Dan Eldridge, conversation I had with him yesterday. I also wanted to get his thoughts of now 10 months into this. You've got the firearms industry still very much being impacted by what they can and cannot sell to law-abiding people in Illinois. He says business has been hit.
Members have seen business decline anywhere between 10 and 50 or 60% versus last year. This is a very seasonal business, so the right way to measure it is, how was my September versus last September? And how much of that is the ban on sales of centerfire magazine-fed rifles and other items, and how much of it is macroeconomic headwinds and higher interest rates and less discretionary spending is hard to say. But it's certainly not helpful. And as in commerce, it's not helpful. In people's ability to defend themselves, it's not helpful. And hopefully the people that are sitting in judgment on this will look at current events and understand the importance of an armed citizenry, of a prepared citizenry in terms of self-defense on an individual and on a community level, and get back to the sensible nature of people having the best tools possible with which to defend themselves.
So again, long story short, the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules yesterday met. They did not even bring up a motion to suspend the gun registry rules. They did bring up a motion to object to the gun registry rules that failed along party lines. And then they brought up a motion to recommend that state police offer clarification, hold some more public hearings, and answer questions, to which Illinois State Police said they're committed to transparency with the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules and the public. They appreciate JCAR working with them to allow the emergency rule to remain in effect as ISP works to address the concerns raised within the statutory authority. So that's where we're at. And we still wait for any kind of outcome from the 7th Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals challenging Illinois' gun and magazine ban. We'll obviously keep you posted on when that happens. But that's where we're at this moment on this Wednesday. I'm Greg Bishop. Thanks for hanging out. And always, you can follow me anywhere. Just search Bishop on Air. You can see the work I do on Twitter to stay up to date with the latest. Or, you can also follow me here on YouTube. So if you like what you're seeing, like, subscribe. It's important to get more of you here so you can stay plugged in what's going on in Illinois because we've got plenty more to get to, all right? So stay tuned. And here live, we will talk about the other action that happened at the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules, and that is this child care center rule on who can actually take part in, being able to care for children. So stay tuned. That's next here on Bishop on Air. Something else we've talked about quite a bit here with Bishop on Air is the ongoing ways that rules are implemented whenever laws are passed, or how executive agencies may actually craft laws through the rulemaking process, and what kind of check and balance is there at the State House for such actions. Administrative rulemaking gets a little bit into the weeds, but I think it's important that people understand how exactly this happens. And in particular, we've got a story about the Illinois Department of Children and Family Services, who are responsible for overseeing daycares, and they had their time in front of the Illinois Joint Committee on Administrative Rules yesterday, where actually it was a bipartisan lashing against the Child Welfare Agency. So let's go ahead and get into that, where you've got the questions that were raised about a rule that was suspended over the summer. And the rule essentially says that child care workers, child care assistants at a certain level of education and certification, they can't watch toddlers under the age of 2 for more than 90 minutes at the beginning of the day and 90 minutes at the end of the day. During COVID, they opened that up to say 3 hours at the beginning of the day and 3 hours at the end of the day. After the emergency was lifted, they brought back that 90-minute rule, and that put a crimp on available staff for these daycare centers. So that was the issue of several meetings in a row of the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules, and clearly legislators from both sides of the aisle not happy about the Department of Children and Family Services when it comes to the regulation of daycare centers. State Representative Dave Vella, a Democrat, he started off yesterday with the concerns he's had and the concerns he's hearing from his constituents. Let me fire this back up for you and get it turned up so you guys can actually hear what Dave has to say here. State Representative Dave Vella.
This rule that has changed a couple times in the last couple weeks, and has changed considerably in the last 6 months. And in the meantime, daycare providers have been contacting my office, contacting all of our offices, not knowing what to do with their small businesses. And I have workers in my district who cannot find a daycare facility to save their lives. And we're jacking around with rules to allow people to work in the daycares. We need daycares. We need daycare providers. We are forcing them out of the system because of the rules we're putting into place.
So, Dave, he went on to discuss how the various constituencies are being impacted by that, and he says that there needs to be relaxation to ensure that these daycare operators can actually do their job and provide daycare services.
And we are now coming up against a time on October 29th when this rule is, the emergency rule is going to go away, and we are, I would say, forced to accept what is on the table, and we will accept what's on the table to make sure that at least, for the time being, these things are, allowed so that people can actually work. But I'm just asking you to look into your department, into yourselves, and try to figure out if there's a better way to do this than having to come back here and fight with us, and just to accept that we have a need, and that I understand you want best practice, but sometimes we just need people to watch our kids while we're going to work. And it's very frustrating to me when a mother comes to me and she says, I can't find some place to watch my child, so I'm going to place my child with their 11-year-old brother because there's not enough daycares, because they just can't open them, because it's too expensive and too complicated. So please, going forward, do what you can to make this process easier, safer, and just more user-friendly for the people who are out there trying to watch our kids.
So again, State Representative Dave Valla there, Democrat, raising his concerns. Wasn't just Democrats, it was also Republicans. Here is State Representative Stephen Reich, who's been very outspoken about all of this.
You've run out the clock, and I think you feel rather smug about that. I'll be honest with you. I think that you think you've pulled one over on us. You've got a rule in place now that you think will solve this problem, which it will not.
So he goes on to just share more frustrations overall about the rule, the process, the stakeholders being upset, the lack of attention paid to those who are asking substantial questions about how they're supposed to comply with this rule. Again, here's State Representative Stephen Reich.
This is unacceptable. This is absolutely unacceptable. This agency deserves nothing but condemnation for the way that this rulemaking has been handled. The failure of this agency to run out the clock, to make this agency think that it has the authority to do this simply because they've given us no alternative, is unacceptable. I know that you folks are looking for a new director, and I hope to God that this director is somebody who comes in and understands the problems that exist in this agency, one of which is daycare licensing, which it has no business doing.
And again, Reich mentioning there that they have a director search underway. But he also talked about how it's not just DCFS that's given JCAR problems.
Other agencies are playing rope-a-dope with us as well. But you guys take the cake. You take the cake. You give us assurances, and then we find out you're not telling us the truth.
So on that, we'll hear some of what State Senator Sue Rezin has to say. But you've got Reich, who reflects on a pretty important news story of a couple of DCFS workers, former workers, who were charged with crimes because of the death of 5-year-old AJ Friend. And here's Representative Reich reflecting on that recent news story.
Had 2 DCFS workers on trial, one of whom was found guilty on 2 charges of child endangerment. This isn't the fault of just those 2 workers, although they deserve the guilty verdict was well deserved. The judge made it plain in his closing argument, in his final reckoning, that the real responsibility here falls on this agency. Your failures have led to the death of children. Your priorities are misplaced. Everything that you've done that leads to the death of children and abuse and neglect has your fingerprints all over it. I am not going to put up with this anymore. I can't understand why it is you think that just because you have the statutory authority to do certain things, you don't have the moral authority to protect the children in your charge. I'm disgusted by every single solitary one of you. That's all I have to say, because if I say more, it'll be too much.
So again, that's State Representative Stephen Reich to the officials from the Department of Children and Family Services that oversee daycare rules and the licensing of daycares. But State Senator Sue Rezin, she brought up something that we actually got a FOIA request in on when they were talking about this over the summer. And this is after the Department of Children and Family Services Deputy Director of Licensing, Shantae Blankenship, told JCAR in July that the department's received more than 300 complaints about the issue of daycare assistants not of a certain certification overseeing rooms of young children. And they say that they got 300 complaints about that issue since 2019. More than 290 were substantiated, she said. This is a quote from her back at that hearing. These numbers clearly show that leaving an assistant alone with a qualified teacher is a safety concern that cannot be ignored. So without a qualified teacher there, they say it's a safety concern that can't be ignored. But a public records request I put in, I got back just a small little sheet. And let me see if I can pull this up so you can see it. Just in what this sheet looks like with a breakdown of the data. It shows that you've got 121 complaints filed over one rule, 148 complaints filed over another rule, 305 total. But then when you look at the substantiated numbers, 19 out of 121, 33 out of 145, that only adds up to about what? 52 substantiated complaints. So State Senator Sue Rezin said that what was presented before is not the correct assumption, and she shared her frustrations with how that was presented several months ago in front of the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules.
Is that correct? That's correct. Okay. So I received somebody who's in my district, because we've all been contacted by the daycare, licensed daycares in our district. This information was FOIA'd. And I just want to correct the record, because when you're talking about data used to come to these decisions, the statement needs to be correct. So according to the FOIA and the information received, instead of 300 complaints, there were 214 complaints that were lodged. However, of the 214 complaints, there were not 292 substantiated complaints that were substantiated. There were 23 complaints that were substantiated out of the 214 complaints. So that's a clearly different picture than your testimony from a month ago, which was there were 300 complaints, and of the 300 complaints against the daycare providers, the aides, there were 292 complaints that were substantiated. These are two completely different pictures that were, and information that was provided to this committee to justify why you are trying to enforce this rule.
So again, that's State Senator Sue Rezin highlighting the disparity between what the committee was told at a committee versus what the actual FOIA documentation shows. And again, daycare licensing complaints, 300 plus filed, complaints filed, but only from my calculation, 52 were substantiated. So fascinating to hear that. Moving on to others, again, it was a bipartisan lashing of the Department of Children and Family Services. State Representative Curtis Tarver, he shared his concerns with how this has played out.
Every morning, so when I take my daughter to school, I tell her two things. Sweetheart, we can get through anything as long as you tell me the truth. And your job is to tell me the truth, my job is to deal with it. Your job is to tell us the truth, our job is to deal with it. You all blatantly lied. I should play this voicemail right now to read it into the record. When you left me a voicemail saying, we've talked, we have an agreement with the stakeholders. And now you all are playing fast and loose like you don't know what the hell a stakeholder is. But you do. It's very easy to know who the stakeholders are because they're the people you didn't talk to. You talked to who you wanted to talk to. You then gave us misinformation and told us that you talked to the stakeholders, and you didn't.
So Tarver talks about the lack of communication and how it's played out and actually hurt this entire process. He continues on.
You get to go back to your office, hide behind emails and things like that. We talk to people that we represent. That's what we do, day in and day out. And we make less money doing it than you do. It's disrespectful. It's disingenuous. I'm honestly tired of it, but I will tell you this. Remember this. That side of the table versus this side of the table. We don't come to you. I don't have to come to you for anything. You will need me before I need you. You'll need this committee before we need you. And this is a bipartisan disdain for your department.
So Tarver highlighting again, just it's not Republicans that are only critical, it's Democrats as well that are critical of the Department of Children and Family Services when it comes to this rulemaking. State Senator Christina Castro, a Democrat from Elgin, she also was pretty forceful with how she felt about the Department of Children and Family Services.
I mean, how are you not all embarrassed to be sitting here? I mean, I'm just asking the question. And I'm not saying the work that you're doing is not hard, but how do you guys continue to lie to this committee, lie to providers? Because you're not the one having to figure out the child care center. You mentioned substitutes. They don't have substitutes. Everybody they try to move and hire has to be approved by you. Has to be approved by DCFS.
She goes on to talk about the overall problem and says that she as a legislator is willing to act to remove some of these powers away from DCFS.
Be forewarned. There will probably be several of us on this committee filing bills to deal with this issue once and for all. And maybe one is to pull it out of DCFS. Because honestly, you need to focus on the one thing that right now you're doing horribly on, is taking care of the kids who are in our care. Maybe that should be all your focus and your mission should be redriven. Because taking care of childcare providers or dealing with it maybe belongs in another department. I don't know which one, maybe DHS, who knows? But the way this is all operated is disgraceful, and you all should be ashamed. All should be ashamed, and I won't be forgetting it.
So again, that's State Senator Christina Castro from yesterday's Joint Committee on Administrative Rules hearing, where they touched on a variety of things, including the rules for daycare operators and whether or not daycare assistants can watch rooms of children under 2 for more than 90 minutes at the beginning and at the end of the day. I connected with Desiree Brookshire. She's with the Illinois Directors, Owners of Child Care Centers, who represents child care operators, and she said that she was actually pleased with how the JCAR meeting went, but disappointed because you've got this rule that's still very much impacting how they can operate. Here is Desiree Brookshire from ILDOC.
Yeah, so we were as thrilled as can be with the JCAR meeting today. Of course, as far as the 3-hour rule is concerned, we did not get the full outcome that we were anticipating, which was for the rule to remain the same that it's been for the last 3 years. And that was the deal that they made with Representative Mason when they promised her to run this through rule instead of the legislative process. However, we've spent the last several months talking with many of the members on JCAR, and it's just wonderful to see that our voices are finally being heard. And that finally somebody is just as frustrated about this as childcare providers are. We've been frustrated for a long time. We've been dealing with the overreach from the department for a long time, and it's just nice to know that we're not the only ones that see the games that they're playing.
And again, when I talked with Desiree yesterday, getting her reaction to the JCAR meeting and what exactly this means and how the impacts are real for daycare operators. So again, here's Desiree Brookshire from the Illinois Directors and Owners of Child Care Centers. Vital service.
Absolutely. So this industry has been in a staffing crisis for a long time, since before the pandemic even. And the 3-hour rule came to be in 2020, in the beginning of the pandemic, to kind of relieve some of that staffing stress. And if anything good could have come out of COVID, that was something that was really helpful and that we wanted to see continue. We have, surveyed the fields, surveyed our, nearly 1,000 members, and hundreds of programs have reported that they could potentially have to close classrooms, if not completely close their doors, if they lost the ability to lose this rule. And this is just a Band-Aid on the gaping wound that is the staffing crisis, but we would not be surviving today without it. More changes need to take place to solve this issue, but this was a good first step, and it needs to continue and survive.
So we've got this rule that is still being debated, and talking with Desiree yesterday, she says that the rule is still in effect, but there was an objection filed at least. Here's Desiree.
No, so I spoke with a representative after the JCAR meeting, and they, at the beginning of the meeting, did approve the rule, the permanent rulemaking. However, the objection was to the fact that this has not really solved the issue, is my understanding. So gotcha. DCFS made a proposal to, because they were hard stop to utilizing this rule in classrooms under the age of 2. And then they were willing to negotiate and say that they would allow that with somebody who has up to 1 year of experience working in the child care field. And we're open to discussing a compromise. We reached out to DCFS in hopes, as the stakeholders for this industry, to reach some type of a compromise. But the problem is we felt like the language was just too complicated to be fairly enforced across the state. And, we ran out the clock on this. DCFS ran out the clock on this. Their proposed draft did not come in until late last week, and the emergency rules expire 10/29. So JCAR was left with no option but to adopt this. Otherwise, we would have lost the rule in its entirety.
So again, sharing with you a conversation I had with Desiree Brookshire from Illinois Directors, Owners, and Child Care Centers about the daycare rule. And part of the conversation also, I got her to react to the Illinois State Senator Christina Castro, who said, we should go ahead and remove the Department of Children and Family Services from overseeing daycare operations. Here's Desiree's response to that.
That's something that ILDOC definitely supports. It's something that we have said for years, that DCFS is an agency in crisis. I mean, I don't think there's anybody in the state that can deny that anymore. They have a lot going on. They just had, an audit come out a couple weeks ago that, did not show them in the best light. The director is stepping down at the end of this year. And we just feel like some major changes are needed, and we are in full support of those changes happening via legislation, hopefully as soon as next spring.
So we'll be watching what happens, but I wanted to offer Desiree as well a final word on this overall issue. Here's what she had to say.
Just to reiterate how thankful we are to the members of JCAR for all the work that they have done on this. I mean, it was just such a relief to, finally hear our voices heard. We're an industry that's been fighting to have our voices heard for a long time. Everybody knows how important childcare is. It is not something that just impacts providers. This impacts the entire state, the workforce across the entire state. So, it is truly a bipartisan issue. It needs bipartisan support, and we need to get these issues resolved before we lose more licensed programs than we already have.
So we'll see how that plays out as we continue to track this issue and its impacts on child care operators. Again, thanks to Desiree Brookshire for connecting with me yesterday. So that is where we're at on that situation. Of course, I'll be on the ground watching everything that happens in the weeks ahead, but definitely keep it here with Bishop on Air. Subscribe, like, hit that notification bell, do whatever you got to do to make sure that you are connected to what's going on here. All right, so again, follow me anywhere. Just search Bishop on Air, and we can connect and make sure that things are, keeping you informed and connected, and you know what's going on with your tax dollars in the state of Illinois. So thanks for tuning in. Coming up, we'll take a look at the Springfield City Council. What should I call this? Should I call it the Council Corral or something? Is that what we should make this? All right, back at it, and I've been covering Springfield City Council for 12, 13 years or something, and even though not doing terrestrial radio at this moment, who knows, maybe we could syndicate it, but I figured I should continue to do this. It's a public service. While it's not the name that we started over a decade ago, maybe we call this the Council Corral, but it's a review of last night's Springfield City Council committee. Well, no, it wasn't a committee. It was a full council meeting. So how did this happen with last night's 2-hour meeting? Well, there was a lot of different zoning issues that they brought up. We're not going to tackle that because we could spend an entire 5 hours on zoning. But they did eventually get through that. And last night for the full city council, they heard the treasurer's report from Treasurer Colleen Redpath-Fager.
Thank you, Mayor Busher. The treasurer's report for the corporate fund for the month of September, beginning balance $73,498,760. We took in total receipts of $21,105,715. We had total disbursements in the month of September totaling $27,394,493, which left the corporate fund ending balance in the month of September at $67,209,982. The ending general fund balance includes $18,320,828, which is the September ending balance of the ARPA money. Thank you. That concludes my report.
So, again, the treasurer's report there, last night's Springfield City Council meeting, you had Mayor Misty Busher, then move forward with another just brief presentation here. It's always fun to hear when young people get involved.
First, like to introduce to you Chief of Staff Disco with the Mayor's Youth Council.
And he gets up, and him following to the podium, scores of young people. Just scores of young people. And each one of them
Mayor,
announce
Alderwomen,
themselves.
Aldermen, everybody else, this is your mayor's youth council, and I'm going to let everybody introduce themselves and give a little bit of what they're going to do.
Again, we're not going to necessarily hear all of that. If you want to check this out, you can watch the entirety of the 2-hour meeting at the city's YouTube page. IL Springfield is their YouTube page where they stream live the meetings Tuesday evening, but you can also watch it anytime you want if you want to get the entirety of it. But with this particular review, the council corral, I guess is what we're going to call it, it's just a truncated version. So let's continue on with a presentation that's not about youth leaders, but instead about something a little bit, I guess, more mundane.
Equally as important, but less glamorous, we now will bring up the healthcare premiums for the city of Springfield. We're going to have some presentations on healthcare premiums. Not near as exciting as meeting our youth council, but it's needed to be done. So you'll have Director Baker here to explain to you what we're doing this evening.
So Director Baker gets up to the podium and talks about what exactly happened here. And if you recall, a few weeks ago, they had several ordinances come up for healthcare concerning city employees in Springfield. And Alderman Hanauer, he moved to put that back in committee, because there were substantial questions. Anytime you're impacting city employees, there's a lot of people who come out, and they make sure that they get their voice heard. So the director of human resources there to talk about what they have in place and what is being proposed for the city council to approve.
We have 2 ordinances that were introduced concerning insurance premiums. There was one for active union employees that had a 1% premium increase and an increased deductible and out-of-pocket maximum. And the other was for active non-union employees and retirees. For the active non-union employees, there was a 1% increase in premiums and an increase in deductible and out-of-pocket for the POS. And then for retirees, there was a 3% premium increase and an increase in the deductible and out-of-pocket maximum.
So the director goes on to talk about how there's also an incentive to get some of the participants to move and change plans that are a higher deductible, but they could offset some of those costs.
To further incent participation, the city funds health saving plans for active employees. So HSAs, or health saving plan accounts, are a lot like flexible spending accounts, but they allow for the city to contribute, and they have much more generous rollover capabilities.
So those health savings accounts, could that be enough to entice people to sign up with this new plan that might have a higher deductible and therefore maybe a lower taxpayer cost? Let's face it, I mean, taxpayers are paying for the health insurance of city employees, just as city employees are the ones that are also putting into their health insurance policy. But the concerns that have been raised, the director of HR lays those out for the city last night.
And one of the concerns that we've heard from retirees is that they are not eligible for this health saving account city contribution. And they're right, they're not. But OBM Director Ramona Metzger came up with a very creative option, and that was that we would look at reducing the premiums for the high deductible account by the same amount that we are contributing in the HSA for active employees, which would reduce that premium cost.
So again, an incentive that they offered up, sharing some concerns that were raised, but you also had a member of the labor committee there to address some of what their understanding is of this.
Hello, everyone. I'm Mike Allwood, the labor co-chair of the Joint Labor Management Committee, but just for the record, we're not allowed, because of the previous lawsuit, to oversee this directly. But since we are the subject matter experts for these plans, we always try to help you guys in the administration anytime you want us to help in we're always happy to do that.
So Mike's there to address some of the questions, but he did share some of the concerns that he's hearing from members who would be impacted by this.
It is a bait and switch. You guys are getting me to get there. Then when I walk out the door, I lose that. So that's been one of the biggest obstacles I've had in convincing people to switch over. They're like, the disparity between the premiums of the two plans doesn't reflect the difference in the coverage levels. And they're not wrong. That's also correct.
So Mike talked about the concerns that he's hearing from members and how that needs to be addressed, but he also did talk about how the incentive of this healthcare savings account could be enough incentive to get people to go to a higher deductible plan. Long story short, they talked about this for like 40 minutes. All right, so they definitely, if you want to get even more into the weeds, taxpayers, you're paying for part of this. City employees in the city of Springfield, you're paying for part of this. So it's important, if you want the details, talk to your representatives, talk to your council people, and that really seemed to be the crux of at least what alder people last night wanted to make sure that was clear, was getting the right information into the hands of who needs it.
Are retiring.
So, long story short is that we just got to do our best for them, and I think education's the key to this. I think that what you're doing by going around and talking to the groups helps a whole bunch. I wish to continue that and we got to find a way to make it even a better way for them to be informed of the benefits of this, because let's get down to it. People are afraid of this. They're afraid if I get off, I'm going to be stuck.
Change is always scary, especially when dealing with public benefits and benefits for those employees, health benefits and retirement benefits, and what's it going to be out of pocket cost and so on. Alderman Donilon, he as well raised some questions about just getting the right information out to where it needs to go.
I mean, what you said absolutely makes sense. Again, but and I'm not an HR specialist, but I would have difficulty explaining it to others. So if you're willing, and I know you've given us years and years of your time, if you're willing to work with our departments, I know we got some smart heads there as well, to put some things together on these two fronts, I think we'll be in better shape in the end.
So we'll be watching that. Obviously, that's still in committee. It does resurface a little bit later on, so be on the lookout. Next up, you've got an ordinance that is up for consideration, adding to a contract for tree trimming service, a total of $10.5 million. So they're adding more to this to go around and trim the trees for city water, light, and power. Obviously, there's some important questions there that older people have.
Tree trimming is something that we get a lot of complaints about with the manner that it's done in, that people don't have enough notification prior to when their trees are being trimmed, and understanding the process. So I'm going to kind of carry over Alderman Donilon's suggestion that we have some sort of an FAQ that goes along with, and I don't know if it needs to be done in conjunction with ASFLUN, I can't say their name right, but, more information to people about, what the schedule is for tree trimming. If we could have a schedule that's posted and made available, so.
It's on our website.
So we need to have that be made more available, because I don't find it easily, and I have frustrations with websites sometimes, but.
I'll tell you, Megan and I, when we were home Monday, because we both took Monday off, we heard some buzzing, and we look out the window, and we don't live in Springfield. We live in South Sangamon County, but we look out the window, and there's a tree trimming service right outside. And we're like, wait, are they trimming? They're like chopping up. What's going on? Well, it was a tree trimming contractor, apparently, paid by the utility, and they were trimming around the power lines. All right, we didn't get any notification, but we figured that was what was going on, and they cleaned it up, and it wasn't a problem. But Alderwoman Conley says sometimes that's not always the case, and there's concerns about that.
Just get this information out, because I hear all the time from people, not all the time, but it's a fairly regular basis. Someone came into my yard yesterday, they cut down half of my tree and left a pile sitting here. What's going on? And I'm like, okay, that sounds like our tree trimming for the power lines. We're protecting the lines. This is important. Why is this stuff still in my yard? Yes, they're going to come back for it. But, it's that constant concern about how people understand what's going on with the tree trimming.
And wanting some more clarity on that and just make sure that it's clear and out in the open that's what's going on. But Connolly had some more questions for a couple of the officials that were there from City Water, Light, and Power.
We trim about 5 miles of line a year. We have a pretty good idea how many days they're going to work. And if you take an estimate and compare them all, that's how we come up with low bid.
And how long have we been doing time and materials?
Ooh, that's a good question. This is probably the third or fourth contract that's been T&M.
Okay, thank you.
So, the timing and the materials and then all of that's an hourly basis, so that's how they're putting that together. Continuing on, again, from a 2-hour Springfield City Council meeting last night. This is, I guess we're calling this the Council Corral. They also had a measure up for consideration about a new Inspector General. So this is who, takes complaints about city business and maybe some conflicts of interest that alder people may have, or that the city department head might have a concern about how they're conducting their business. They complain to the Inspector General. We've had, I believe it was Roger Holmes for years, and we have these quarterly updates where we hear about investigations that we may not have known about. But apparently the old Inspector General retiring, and now it's time for a new one. Jason Brokaw was there to take any questions he may have, but also to share some of the support he's got from other municipal leaders in the area.
An ordinance appointing Jason Brokaw as Inspector General for the City of Springfield. The chair will entertain a motion to place agenda number 2023-467 on final passage.
So moved.
Second. We have a motion and a second. We're open for discussion, and I know Mr. Brokaw is here, so he will come up, and then we have another.
So again, Mr. Brokaw was there, and here he is talking about his resume for last night's Springfield City Council meeting.
Opportunity to serve. I was formerly in the Office of Corporation Counsel before entering private practice, and since then I have concentrated my efforts in the law in units of local government, municipalities, county work. So I feel I'm well suited to serve and look forward to doing that upon appointment.
And then there's someone next to you that's wanting to speak on your
I have,
behalf.
I have with me in support my one of my clients, Mayor Lopez from the Village of Jerome. If he wants to say something, I'll let him, but he's just here.
I was here to support him. Didn't know I was going to call up, but I've known Jason since 2014, the year after I took office in 13. Been very valuable to our office, to our building, to our village, and also has a lot of contacts within this building. And he's a great asset to us and will be a great asset to the city. And I support his appointment, and he does keep me out of trouble in the village. So thank you, Mayor and the council, and thank you for all your work.
And then you had Alderwoman Lakeisha Purchase. She spoke up and explained why she is going to be a present vote on this particular ordinance.
Mayor, I just want to echo what Mayor Mike said. Jason will definitely be an asset, and he has represented me, so I will be present on my vote tonight. But I encourage everybody else to go yes.
Any other aldermen or alderwomen have any comments?
So again, Alderwoman Lakeisha Purchase there saying that she's voting present because she at one point was a client of Mr. Brokaw. So he ultimately was approved. Purchase stepping out of that. Another measure up for consideration, it deals with ShotSpotter, which has a new name called Sound Thinking. Alderman Sean Gregory, he had questions just about making sure people understood what exactly is going on with ShotSpotter. In Springfield, they have it set up in certain communities. It's there to hear for any potential gunshots, to provide an initial investigation element for law enforcement to go investigate, but they have to re-up the contract. So they're looking at the services and how much it is, and Alderman Gregory sounding off on just some of the things he wants to make sure they highlight.
Last week, I asked for this to be on debate because I wasn't totally sure what it all entailed, and Chief did a fabulous job, not only in conversation, but via email as well to all of us that we all received about it. And I do plan on voting for this, and all I would ask as Chief is if we could be sent some data on, I know you can't give your whole game plan, but if you can send us some data on how the previous time worked, and were we able to get in areas where we have a lot of shootings and crime and
So a lot of that data, I would imagine, is going to be forthcoming, but Alderman Gregory shared just some more of his thoughts on all of this.
Anytime we engage in a product like this, that does, continue on some of the stigmas and of over-policing in our community. Now, I've definitely seen the benefits of ShotSpotter and some of those things, no doubt about it. However, we still have to be attentive to the community and their feelings and some of the things that do happen. So I do support this now, and I look forward to looking at some more information. Thank you.
So again, Alderman Gregory saying he will support this. You have the police chief, Ken Scarlett, for the City of Springfield Police Department. He shared his thoughts.
Look at that. I mean, it discusses specifically how this is designed to prevent over-policing in neighborhoods. And that's one of the reasons we went with this, is that it relies on data analytics and predictive policing methods. So a lot smarter people than I did wrote this, but I think it is a great project. And I would certainly echo what you said and agree with you. If this is not working how it's designed to, then we shouldn't be paying for it. And I think that's important. As the leader of the organization, it's my responsibility to ensure that what we pay for is working properly. So I'll certainly work to get some sort of statistics as far as the success of the program.
So I imagine we may hear more about that from the Springfield City Council chambers. Moving on, you've got more was discussed about the insurance situation that we earlier touched on. So they got through all their business, they approved things, they moved on. Alderman Hanauer, he said that, well, should we go ahead and move that insurance measure, the two insurance measures, and get those voted on? Here's how that played out.
Thank you.
Mayor,
Yes, sir.
did we want to pull the insurance, the two insurance?
Depends upon if you're ready to vote tonight or if you want to have a special meeting next week before the committee of the whole.
Well,
we do have that timeline Mr. Allwood referred to, that we have to have the
we need
package to our
time to move
employees
on them.
by.
So
It's the council can have a special meeting prior to the committee of the whole meeting next week at 5:30.
all right.
Or you can do it this evening, whatever the council would prefer.
Well, I guess if we vote to bring it out, I guess hopefully we would have the votes to pass it then, right?
I'd like to hear from some people now that they've heard this presentation tonight.
All right, that's fine.
Special meeting it is.
All right,
Special
meeting it is. So expect a special meeting next week before the committee of the whole, where they'll just deal with this particular issue. Moving on, you've got some citizens that were there to address the committee. One in particular, we'll let them announce themselves so that we hear who it is.
I am Muriel McDaniels, and I represent L&M Gymnastics and Kids. Pardon me. More importantly, I represent the children that have served our program, past and present. And last year, this governing body voted for us to receive funds from the cannabis and the TIF grant. That did not come to pass. There was not much communication with the Department of Economic Development after the article was put in the newspaper. So there was just a lot of things that, communication-wise, that did not happen to enable us to, go the next step.
So what's she talking about? What newspaper article? If you look at the Illinois Times, and their website is illinoistimes.com, you'll be able to see just exactly what she was discussing about the issue of, marijuana tax revenues. Because, of course, the state taxes cannabis upwards to 40+%. That's split a whole bunch of different ways from the state. I think like 25% goes to communities that have been impacted by the war on drugs, for instance. But local governments can also tack on sales taxes. And that's the amount that we're talking here. The Illinois Times delves into this. Dean Olson writing the headline, Marijuana Money Mistakes. Good alliteration there. But audit of new city grant program finds many inconsistencies. And you can go through and you can read this. This was published about 6 days ago. But it goes on to say that Mayor Misty Buscher, who beats incumbent Jim Langfelder, in the April election said that she put a pause on the program, including a second round of grants for at least several months while her administration fixes problems that caused the program to operate haphazardly under the Langfelder administration, they said. About $493,000 in cannabis sales taxes is available to distribute, the IT says, and 16 applications for business grants were filed. And you've got an internal audit conducted by the Springfield office of Sikich, a Naperville-based firm, and commissioned by the Bush administration after Yazel encountered inconsistencies in the program, and it found that the grant applications filled out by businesses, quote, did not help clarify the confusion that hampered the program. So clearly, this program's on pause, and that's something that this business owner who has a business that helps young children get the spirit of dance and gymnastics, and she said that it's harmful that they feel that they've been dragged through an unnecessary situation here.
It's very, very frustrating to know that you need to have an upgrade, and that's why we did the application of the facility, as well as equipment to have things move forward.
So she continued on to talk about one of the messages that she shares with her students about getting back up when you're knocked down.
That's where we are. We've taught our children for many a year that sometimes you fall short of your goal, but when you get knocked down, you get back up. So I am standing in front of you as our representative saying, we're standing back up, and we're expecting a change of things to happen. So we're going to ask that you revisit that again, look at it seriously for the businesses. We were told this is primarily, this portion is for minority-owned small businesses on the east side of Springfield, and that's where we are and have been for quite a while.
So this tax revenue, something that Alderman Sean Gregory had championed, and he had some thoughts about all of this as well during yesterday's council meeting. Here's the alderman.
Really bothered by the audit is not that the past administration had some hang-ups, didn't get money out. Those things don't really bother me. What bothers me is that this audit was sent to 12 people. Our economic development director, us 10 up here, I'm sure the mayor, I'm sure Mr. Murdoch, so maybe more. But it went from us to review, to discuss, to leaked out to some article that smeared people's businesses. They smear people's names, lies, mistruths. And that's what bothered me the most about this audit. Not the audit and not the improvements that our mayor will make on this program. Is that we, on some political mess, 22, 21 businesses, black-owned businesses, were smeared, some justly, some unjustly. And that's the problem that I have with this audit.
So Alderman Gregory raising concerns with, I guess, the alderman not really discussing this publicly before it got out into the media. That's how it works. So media there, and kudos to the Illinois Times for getting this and investigating it and publishing it. And obviously it's an important story because those are tax dollars. You know, if you agree or disagree with how cannabis is being sold, these are tax dollars that should be going towards certain areas. But you've got Gregory saying that the goal is clear as to what this program really is all about.
Generate taxes and do things for young people and things of that nature. So I just wanted to say that I support you in any way I can. I'll have the conversation. We'll put our minds together. I have some thoughts on some vacant buildings that may work out for you in the zone. But I encourage this administration to look at the ones who tried to do right.
So we'll see what happens. Alderwoman Conley raising some questions as well.
You just physically weren't in the very small space of the existing zone. And I think we've had some time. It might be time to consider expanding those boundaries. We have, the state of Illinois has a disproportionately impacted areas map for the city of Springfield that is significantly more than wards 2 and 3. And it may be that we're clearly missing some minority business owners who, and I don't know exactly your location, I don't know how it would track with that map, but I think that's something that we probably need to put on our plate to consider is the city spreading this program out so that we track with where the state has also identified. There are disproportionately impacted areas throughout the city of Springfield.
So clearly, we're not hearing this for the last time. That's obvious. But at the end of it, you've got the city saying that they're going to do what they can to address this. Here's the mayor with Val Yazel, the city's economic development director, and this business owner.
Mrs. McDaniels, please make sure that Director Yazel has your contact information so we can follow up with you. And I don't know if you remember this, but I have a 29-year-old who took tumbling at L&M, so.
All right.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And I get that a lot, people, because we do have a history, and it's not just the children now. We're into second and third generation.
Yes, ma'am. She doesn't have kids, but she could, so.
That's all right. That's all right.
I wanted you to know, my 45 and 48-year-old daughters took
L&M.
from
Yeah.
L&M gymnastics, so we know that.
We have someone in the crowd that doesn't.
That's pretty
we don't need to
incredible.
know you.
So that is your council meeting from last night. Council corral, I guess, is what we're going to call it here with Bishop on Air. Thank you all for taking part. Listen, typically the show is not going to be that long, all right? But Wednesdays, if we got a council meeting to review, we'll do this as a bonus. So it's just a nice public service announcement for those out there. The council corral. I'm Greg Bishop, Bishop on Air. Have yourself a great rest of the day.